This video is yet another activity tracker help video. This one specifically is going to focus on using temp groups within Activity Tracker to answer specific questions. Temp groups are a feature that's generally available within PCDART, and temp groups are a temporary assignment of a group to a cal. So it has nothing to do with group number, but it's just a temporary designation or place to put a group of cows to be able to do further analysis with them. It is not a system for leaving some sort of permanent identification on a cow. You would never want to put cows in a temp group where you hope to keep them there for some time and refer back to them later, because it's very easy for someone with one keystroke to erase all the temp groups within the herd. And in fact, I'll show you going right to the input desk. It is good practice before doing any temp group analysis to go ahead and zero out all current temp groups to be sure that we're not looking at a different subset of cows than what we want. Each cow can only have one temp group at a time, so if we assign a temp group to a cow that already has a temp group, it's going to write over her last temp group and replace it with a new one we just asked to assign it to. Or if cows are already in that temp group, let's say we come up with a group of 100 cows and we assign them to temp group 5. Well, if there were another 3 or 4 cows already in temp group 5, now our temp group 5 has 105 cows instead of 100. So it's a good practice to go ahead and hit this zero temp group all right there, and you can choose heifers or cows, and with this one button it will erase all temp groups on every cow in the database. And again, that's a good practice before doing any analysis. Temp group numbers can be assigned right here from the input desk. Can either key animals in or go a pick list and apply, and if we grab an animal and apply, we can very easily enter a temp group number. They're 2-digit, 1 through 99. So in most all PCDART reports as well, we can also assign a temp group. But Activity Tracker has a way of not only assigning temp groups, but utilizing temp groups to answer some good questions about a dairy. So I'll open Activity Tracker off the Tracker menu in PCDART. And suppose my question is this: are cows on this dairy, do cows on this dairy that have metritis, do they leave the herd any faster or any sooner than cows that don't have metritis? And we could look at this separately by lactation group. For now, we'll just focus on first lactation animals and say the first lactation animals that had a recorded metritis incidence, did more of them leave by 30 days in milk than cows that didn't have a metritis incidence? Kind of looking at the success of our treatments for metritis. So I'm going to start here by selecting first lactation animals only, and I'm going to go grab the last 12 months worth of data. It's important when we start looking at subgroups of cows that we have adequate numbers of cows in each group. We certainly want to have at least 50 animals in each group to do any analysis like this. So let's just look at the metritis events on this dairy. Happens to be item number 21. And let's look at all the metritis cows over the last year on this dairy. And notice there's 1,300 activities that occurred or were reported on first lactation animals. If I click on that 1315, I notice that, whoops, there's not 1,300 cows. There are only 347 animals recorded here, yet there's 1,300 plus treatments, suggesting that there's a lot of repeats in here. And so I really only want to look at the first case. If I assign the temp group right there, so here's the Assign Temp Group button. Once I generate a cow list, I can either assign it by clicking on the menu item or by clicking on that button, either way. But if I assign this temp group, it would assign them only those 347 cows. So the temp groups are assigned to cows, not to activities. So I could do that, or I could go and say, hey, I only want to count, or I don't want to count repeats, I only want to count the first occurrence. And if I hit preview on that, it shows 341. The number's pretty close because sometimes depending on our date range, a cow could calve twice in the period, so it's never going to be exact, but pretty close. So we got 341 recorded metritis cases in the last year. So I'll click on that. And now the count and the cows match pretty closely. So I want to assign these cows, these first lactation cows, to a temp group. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Assign Temp Group, and I'll assign them to temp group 10. can choose, again, anything from 1 to 99. So that means every first lactation animal in the last year that got metritis, I just assigned to temp group 10. So now I hit close, and I'll hit close again. And so now I want to look at 30-day cull rates on these animals. So I'm going to do this by, I'm going to again go over the same period of time. I'm going to view a table by days in milk. I want to look at only first lactation animals. And I want to grab the fresh event, because that's going to be my denominator. And I want to look at all culls to see how many animals left at by 30 days in milk. And I think I'll also grab deads on there too, just as a subset of the culls to see how many of those died. And of course I'll show the metritis event. And what I will do now is go to the settings tab and say, with the temp group filter here, I can look and say I only want to include animals that were not in temp group 10 in this case, or I could say I want animals that are in temp group 10 or a range. So by putting it in the not window, that means I'm going to look at all cows that were not in temp group 10. If I put it instead in the minimum value window, that means I'm going to look at cows that were only in temp group 10. And if I put another number here, I could put a range in. In this case, I would look at cows that are in temp group 10 to 12. So I'm going to start out with those cows that are only in temp group 10. Again, we're going to look at first lactation animals only, and I'll hit preview. And so show there's 323 of them that freshened without any that did have metritis. There are animals in our temp group that did have metritis. So you can see down here the note shows that these are animals that are in temp group 10. And so I'm going to click on this to show percentage of number of calvings. And you can see that the cull rate by 30 days in milk is 0.3%. You know, by 60 days in milk, add those two together, it's 1.5%. And all culls is still very little, 2.7%. Not many animals leaving by 30, 60, or 90 days in milk, and the most of those were actually deads. So you can see actually the raw numbers here, but again, pretty good success on those animals that actually got metritis. Again, you can see the metritis rates here. The numbers are a little bit higher, simply because some of those cows have probably calved again, potentially, and so again, we're going to be pretty close there, but not perfect. So now let's go and look at the animals that were not in temp group 10. So this is our group that is not in temp group 10. So they're the ones that did not have metritis. Okay, so now of course we're showing no metritis events, and we have 639 animals, and I'll show this again, the percentage of calvings. And if we look at the cull rates, they're still quite low, but very, very similar to what they were for animals that had metritis. This is something like, a little over 2%, and boy, not much difference between that and the group that had metritis. So again, the temp groups designation can be used in a lot of different ways in PCDART. We can go to a cow list, find a group of animals, assign them to a temp group, then elect to look at those animals exclusively or inclusively, and focus on how those animals performed from a health standpoint. Also, once we assign them to temp group here in Activity Tracker, then we could go to another report and use our temp groups to look at them in another manner. We can do it within other trackers like Conception Tracker. Our next question may be those animals that had metritis, were their conception rates any different than those that didn't have metritis? So there's a lot of things that can be done with these temp groups, crossing across trackers, across different reports, and Activity Tracker gives a convenient way to assign cows and to also analyze cows that are in various temp groups.